In September 1939, the world cracked open. Tanks rolled into Poland, and within days, the globe was no longer a collection of nations, but a chessboard of alliances, invasions, and occupation. The Second World War had begun. Lines were drawn, allies to one side, Axis to the other. But look closely. Along the edges of the conflict, beyond the fire and fury, there were those who stood still, not because they were idle, not because they were indifferent, but because they dared. Some would say pretended to be neutral. They were the watchers, the fence-sitters, the tightrope walkers. Some, like Switzerland, wrapped themselves in alpine steel and dared the world to touch them. Others, like Sweden, traded awe and silence in exchange for survival. A few, Spain, Ireland, were scarred by civil wars or struggles for sovereignty, choosing to keep their powder dry no matter the pressure. Some, like Turkey, were still stitching together a nation from the ruins of empire. Too fragile for foreign entanglements, too proud to be puppets. And then there were those who flirted with both sides. Portugal, Turkey, pragmatic, clever, at times ruthless in their balancing acts. Neutrality in a time of total war is not a refusal to act. It is a decision to act differently, to play a different game altogether. To be neutral is not to be still. It is to be silent, careful, and above all, useful. For every battlefield there was a backroom deal. For every army, a courier. And in cities like Stockholm and Bern, the war whispered through telegrams, passed hands in smoke-filled cafes, and hid behind polished embassy doors. Each neutral country had its reasons, but those reasons were shaped by the people in charge. In many cases, neutrality depended on the decisions of a single leader or a small circle of power. Their judgment, fears, and ambitions played a major role in keeping their countries out of the war. Some old, buried in centuries of precedent, others new, born of fear, opportunity, or fatigue. But neutrality came at a cost. For some, it was moral ambiguity. For others, economic gain at the price of public shame. And for all, it was a daily struggle to avoid slipping into war, into occupation, into history's judgment. This documentary is not about the battlefields. It is about the quiet front, the still waters that ran deep. We will walk the snowy banks of Stockholm, where heroes saved lives with forged passports. We'll visit the silent vaults of Zurich, where fortunes, clean and blood-stained, were stored. We'll sit in the smoke of Lisbon, where spies toasted across enemy lines, and we'll stand at the Dial Éireann in Dublin, where Ireland declared it would fight no one's war but its own. This is not a tale of cowardice, nor heroism. It is a tale of caution, of calculation, of consequences. This is the story of the neutrals. Neutrality is not a shield. It is not retreat. It is a doctrine, a centuries-old strategy that Switzerland perfected long before the first tank crossed the Polish border. Switzerland's neutrality was not invented in 1939. It had already been a way of life for over 100 years. Following the Napoleonic Wars, the 1815 Congress of Vienna officially recognized Switzerland's permanent neutrality. And the Swiss, they didn't just agree, they embraced it as a national identity. A nation surrounded by powers far larger than itself, Switzerland learned early on that survival wasn't about strength, but balance. They declared no side. They offered no troops, but they trained their citizens in arms, fortified their mountains, and built a doctrine of defiance through discretion. So when Hitler's Wehrmacht plunged into Poland in 1939, Switzerland didn't hesitate. Within 3 days, It had mobilized 430,000 combat troops and over 200,000 support personnel, an army of nearly 650,000, 10,000 of them women. Eventually, the number would rise to 850,000, more than 20% of the entire Swiss population at the time. A fifth of the country in uniform. Parliament appointed 61-year-old Henri Guisan as general. His mission was clear: keep Switzerland Swiss. The Germans planned otherwise. Under the pan-Germanist vision of Neuordnung, Switzerland was a ripe target. Operation Tannenbaum was the codename for a full invasion. The Nazis mocked the country as a medieval remnant, full of renegade Germans. Some, in Switzerland's tiny, Nazi-aligned movement, agreed, but they failed. The Swiss sense of democracy, national pride, and fierce independence held firm. Still, Switzerland knew it could not resist a full invasion head-on. Guisan changed strategy. Static border defences were abandoned in favour of the National Redoubt, a plan to cede the populated lowlands if necessary and retreat into the well-stocked, heavily fortified Alps. There, the Swiss army would sabotage, ambush, and wait. The message to the Nazis: invade, and you'll bleed every inch. Espionage also made Switzerland a different kind of battlefield. Spies from every nation moved through Bern, Zurich, and Geneva. Alan Dulles, America's man in Bern, turned Swiss soil into a centre of Allied intelligence. From these mountain valleys came plans that helped take Corsica, Sardinia, and Salerno. Not all within were loyal. Some Swiss officers admired Hitler, Colonels von Jolas and Bircher among them. They were watched. And when Swiss citizens betrayed their country, they faced justice. 33 were sentenced to death for Nazi espionage. 17 were executed. Dozens more were imprisoned. In total, nearly 100 were convicted of treason. The Swiss establishment used the post-war trials to purge its conscience and dismantle pro-Nazi networks. But the skies held no respect for borders. In 1940, Germany violated Swiss airspace 197 times. The Swiss shot down 11 Luftwaffe planes using German-made equipment, enraging Hitler. Saboteurs were sent in retaliation. They were caught. Switzerland stood firm. Allied violations followed too. Over 6,000 Allied aircraft crossed into Swiss skies. Some pilots simply sought refuge. Others, tragically, dropped bombs. Cities like Basel, Zurich, and Schaffhausen were mistaken for German targets. Civilians died. Swiss fighters engaged American bombers. 36 Allied airmen were killed. Even interned Allied crews suffered. Over 160 were imprisoned at Wau-Willemoes camp, under the watch of a pro-Nazi Swiss officer. Only US diplomatic pressure secured their release. One US attaché warned that continued mistreatment might lead to navigation errors during bombing runs. On the ground, the human toll deepened. Switzerland's refugee policy was strict. Too strict. Of the 300,000 total refugees admitted, only 60,000 were civilians fleeing Nazi persecution. Just 27,000 were Jews. As many as 24,000 Jews were turned away, sent back to almost certain death. The excuse? Supplies were dwindling. "Our little lifeboat is full," said one Swiss official. The international community would later call it complicity. And yet, amid bureaucracy and cruelty, humanity flickered. The Ładoś Group, working from the Polish embassy in Bern, forged Latin American passports, saving thousands of Jews. Teachers, priests, and ordinary citizens hid and helped. The nation's soul strained between silence and salvation. Switzerland's neutrality also gave it a powerful role as a protecting power. Unlike other neutral states, Switzerland stood at the very centre of the war, geographically encircled by Axis powers, financially entangled with both sides, and constantly pressured to take a stance. In a sense, maintaining neutrality under such conditions was not a passive act. It was a feat more difficult than choosing to fight. It acted on behalf of dozens of countries whose embassies had closed. It protected American interests in Japan, German interests in Britain, and even Vichy France's interests in Egypt. It arranged repatriations, supervised embassies, and ensured the welfare of prisoners of war. It also brought education behind barbed wire. The Service of Intellectual Assistance to Prisoners of War sent over 500,000 books to POWs. Study groups, languages, history, learning became a form of resistance. But neutrality had another price: commerce. Switzerland traded with both sides. It exported watches, tools, and electricity. It imported food, coal, and gold, German gold. Between 1939 and 1945, Swiss banks accepted over 1.3 billion Swiss francs worth of gold from Nazi Germany, some of it plundered from occupied nations, some of it looted from Holocaust victims. After the war, a reckoning came. The Bergier Commission, an independent panel of historians, documented it all: the trade, the gold, the art sales, the truths long hidden. Switzerland was never invaded, its cities mostly spared, its soldiers never fought abroad, but the war did not pass it by. It passed through it. Espionage, intrusion, compromise, silence, heroism, betrayal. This is not the story of a land untouched. In fact, the action that took place inside this neutral nation, spies, sabotage, diplomacy, internment, and aerial violations, was no less intense than what was witnessed in the territories under fire. It is the story of a nation walking a narrow ridge between survival and surrender, between principle and pragmatism. This is Switzerland, fortress, messenger, mirror, a neutral ground in a world gone mad.